Green Naturalist. Welcome back to another video. Well, President Trump has issued a presidential action, and this one relates directly to the ecology of the Delta. Let's chat. So on January 20th, 2025, President Trump issues a presidential action in the form of a memorandum. And this memorandum is entitled, Putting People Over Fish, Stopping Radical Environmentalism to Provide Water to Southern California. In it, the memorandum instructs the Secretaries of Commerce and the Interior to provide more water to Southern California from the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And the memorandum directly draws the connection to firefighting and as a component of the water supply. And also that one of the reasons that California is not doing this is because of water needed to protect a fish called Delta Smelt. A lot to unpack here. For one thing, California already diverts quite a bit of water from the Delta to Southern California through the California Aqueduct. This is something we've been doing for decades. So there's that. What they're talking about doing is wanting to do this more, divert more water from the Delta. Now, a bunch of other things to address. One, water supply for fighting the fires in LA. These horrible, huge, devastating fires was not the issue. It's not a matter of having enough water. These fires get started in conditions of hotter temperatures, drier vegetation, lots of drier vegetation, high winds. So when these things get started, it's not a matter of water. There's really no realistic amount of water that you're gonna throw at these things to stop them. In wildland firefighting, you don't hear about firefighters like quenching fires, putting out fires with water. When you listen to the news, they talk about percent containment. And that's because the effective way of dealing with a big fire is not to splash it with water, but to cut it off from additional fuel sources. You cut fuel breaks, sort of gaps in trees or brush, so that when the fire reaches the edge of the break, it can't jump across it into more fuel. You deny the fire fuel, not the water. And that's what we saw in the LA fires. It was, and all the fires in Western North America. Fuel breaks, containment, that's what people focus on. Not trying to get more water on the fire to put it out. Water can be very useful in certain circumstances. The use of fire retardant, very useful in many circumstances, but really fire breaks. Stopping the fire from spreading to new fuel sources, that's how you contain a fire. And that is why it's measured in percent containment on the news. Another thing, it's true that California does try to keep water in the Delta to protect this fish called the Delta Smelt. It's a little fish, 2 or 3 inches long, smells like cucumber, as a fun little fact. And it used to be very numerous, very abundant in the sort of brackish water of the Delta. It's the only place on the planet that it's found. It's endemic to the Sacramento-San Joaquin Delta. And in the 1980s or so, it started to really decline rather precipitously. And in 1993, was listed as federally threatened on the Federal Endangered Species List and also the California Endangered Species List as well. And with that protection comes actions that we as a people are supposed to do. And maintaining water volume is one of those things because, you know what, fish need water. there's often some kind of dismissive attitudes about protecting biodiversity. Why? So a species is endangered. So what? Let it go extinct. Millions of species have gone extinct. Let this one go extinct too. Protecting biodiversity has a lot of extrinsic and intrinsic values. There are tons of things that we humans gain from having species exist in the world. And it's kind of our responsibility to maintain them, especially when we're the ones who are driving them to extinction. If it's our fault, if we broke it, it seems to me that it's just a reasonable and responsible thing to say we should fix it. It just seems like the normal, responsible response. I mean, we get a lot of other things, though, from beyond the responsibility of fixing our own messes. We get a lot of stuff from biodiverse areas. We derive medicines from species in the wild. We gain agricultural benefits of like pest control from species in the wild. We have ecotourism to go and look at species in the wild. We get a lot of stuff out of having species in the wild. So just letting species go extinct is a kind of irresponsible and self-harming thing to do in a lot of ways. We are impoverished when we let species go extinct because we lose all these benefits. There are also sort of less economic-y, tangible benefits, like the fact that human mental health generally increases when you spend time in natural areas, stuff like that. So I think there are lots of reasons to protect smelt and all of the other animals that rely on the water flowing down the rivers and through the delta. Because it's not just Delta Smelt. Lots of other things benefit as well. There are millions of birds that use the delta every year. There are other fish like sturgeon and salmon, which have great importance both economically in many ways and also culturally. For example, to the native peoples who have lived here for tens of thousands of years and have, for example, salmon as a really important part of their culture. Protecting the salmon is important for those people. Rightly so. There's another component to this memorandum that I want to address, and it has to do with a particular quote. It says there is an, quote, enormous water supply flows wastefully into the Pacific Ocean. So I have two comments about this. One is that water flowing into the Pacific Ocean is what protects a lot of that biodiversity that I just talked about. The Delta Smelt, yes, but the fish, the birds, all the other wildlife, and many plants, an entire ecosystem is supported by flows coming downriver through many of the rivers of California that meet in this delta and then flow out into the Pacific Ocean. Those flows are not being wasted. They are supporting millions of species. And another component that rivers have when they just flow, that we humans benefit, in the delta specifically, is something called saltwater intrusion. The ocean is salty. And one of the ways that the delta stays largely freshwater, especially the sort of central and eastern parts of the delta, is by having water, fresh water, flowing down rivers and kind of pushing the salt water and holding it at bay towards, well, the bay. That means that rice can be grown, that tons of other crops can be grown in delta soils. If those freshwater flows weaken and reduce, the salt water has less pressure holding it back in the Straits of Carquinez and in the bay, and it intrudes into the soils of the delta. If soils get too salty, they're not really good for farming. So by reducing the flows of the rivers, we're reducing the vitality and viability of farmlands in the delta. Doesn't seem great. And then also, there's this sort of intrinsic quality that I think is a weird thing to say is wasted. water flowing down a river to the sea is wasted. Since when? Rivers have been flowing from their headwaters up in hills and mountains down to the sea since there has been land for water to flow across. Humans have derived great advantages from rivers. We live along them, we've used them for transportation. Speaking about transportation, they serve as transportation corridors for a gazillion other species as well. Having water flowing down a river, having a river just be a river, functionally be a river, doesn't strike me as a waste. It strikes me as an important part of the landscape. A mountain is not a waste of dirt. It's a mountain with everything from the physical characteristics of the mountain to the life that it supports to the role that it plays in the geology of the region and the climate of the region to the benefits to the human spirit of seeing mountains, to the poetry of the mountain. It's a mountain. That is not a waste. Same goes for a river. There's nothing wasteful about a river being a river. And so I personally really object to having it called a waste and having it viewed that way. I think that's an impoverished, simplistic way of looking at a river. So, but there it is. I mean, the memorandum is out there. The president has given these two secretaries, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of Interior, these instructions. The memo lays out a timeline. It says that these secretaries have 90 days to start enacting these policies and to report back on how their progress has gone and what steps to take in the future. So we may all be seeing the impacts, suffering the impacts of this memorandum in the very near future, unfortunately. So we will have to stay tuned, we will have to stay vigilant, we will have to stay engaged with what is going on and how to respond to it. I'm quite confident that there are going to be challenges, legal challenges, policy challenges from the state of California to this memorandum. So we'll see how that all plays out, and we will see what more comes our way. So there's a little something about this memorandum, about this latest policy and environment interaction. And I hope you learned something. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this memorandum, on what we can do to protect the biodiversity of California, of what you think of the current goings-on. Thank you very much for the view. And as always, get out there, enjoy the natural world.